As human beings, God has given us responsibilities in this life, and God is calling for accountability, because in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 9, we see God calling Adam and Eve after their disobedience. We see the concept of accountability. It is so much deeply woven into the fabric of biblical teaching, reflecting God's desire for His creation and to live in accordance with His will and also with His purpose. This notion of accountability, we see it is first introduced in the Genesis narrative, that is in Genesis chapter 3, after Adam and Eve's disobedience. And when Adam and Eve disobeyed God, God came calling them to account for their actions. Because in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 9 it says, But the Lord God called to the man, Where are you? And the question that God is asking Adam and Eve, Where are you? It signifies not only a physical inquiry, but also that moral and spiritual one, which highlights now the expectation of responsibility for one's action. And not only in the Old Testament, where God is calling for accountability, we can also see it through the apostolic writings, which further develops this theme of God's call to accountability, because Paul wrote in the book of Romans chapter 14 and verse 12, which states, So then, each of us will give an account of himself to God. And this shows the personal nature of accountability, where every believer or where every leader is responsible for their actions before God. And if we can try to define what accountability is, it is that obligation, or it is that willingness whereby you accept responsibility for your actions, or where you accept responsibility for your duties. Because as a leader in any position you are, you have been given duties to accomplish, and you must be willing to accept all those responsibilities for your actions or for your duties. So accountability, it is that act now of taking responsibility for the results of your work, regardless of whether your work is successful, regardless whether your work is unsuccessful. Because accountability helps with practicing honesty. Accountability, as a leader, you find it can also benefit your relationship with your team members. And leadership accountability is very crucial. The call to accountability, it has those practical implications for believers or leaders, because accountability encourages a life of integrity, stewardship, and obedience. But most of the time, accountability has been misunderstood. When we are called for accountability, like now, when God came into the Garden of Eden and called Adam and Eve and asked them, Where are you? Sometimes we misunderstand accountability. God was not calling Adam and Eve, asking them where they are to condemn them. No, He had come looking for them because of the love He had for them. But most of the time, even in the organizations that we are leading, especially we who are in the church organization, when we are called into accountability, most of the time we feel it is an attack. But accountability is not an attack. Because in every functioning democracy, there is something power must learn to accept. If you are a leader in a church, because I'm a Christian, when you are in power, when you have been given a responsibility, when you have been given a duty, you must learn to accept accountability. You must learn to be asked questions and also giving the right answers to the questions that you are being asked. But many of us, we are taking accountability as an attack. When people calls for accountability, we say we are being attacked. But in every functioning democracy, every leader, you must learn to accept to being questioned. And when you are being questioned, be humble enough, have the spirit of humility to elaborate your actions. Okay? Because accountability is a shared weight. People are not calling for accountability because they want to dethrone you. No. Accountability is a shared weight. And someone said that rights without accountability is like scales which does not balance. We need to accept that accountability is often misunderstood. And accountability is not disrespect. When you are being questioned, you are not being disrespected. Accountability is not rebellion. When people are calling you for accountability, they are not rebelling against you, because accountability is a shared weight. When people calls you for accountability, they are not being hostile to you. No. It is responsibility in action. Accountability is responsibility in actions. And when your team members ask questions, even in this nation, when citizens ask questions, we need to understand they are not attacking the leadership, no. But in the real sense, they are strengthening the system. Because power that cannot be questioned, possessions or titles that cannot be questioned, they are power that begins to forget its limits. And history is very clear on this. Unchecked power does not become efficient, but it becomes dangerous. And someone said, who is so much in leadership, said that accountability is not opposition. When you are being questioned, you are not being opposed. Accountability is not opposition, but accountability is participation. We want to know the progress of this organization. We want to know how the organization is doing, because we are participators. Accountability is a shared weight, and democracy survives where questions are around. Any organization where questions are around, it is an organization that progresses, and not only progresses, it also flourishes. Remember, accountability is not an attack. Be ready to be questioned